So, and I think this is interesting, and she kind of makes this point that, we get an advantage if we don't just say, belief versus unbelief, right? A believer versus an unbeliever. She says, no, well, a better approach would be a believer in God versus a believer in an idol, right? Because all folks have idols, right? Even the people that claim not to believe anything, they have idols, right? And so and we'll see that as we go through this, right? So this identifying idols, in which she pulls right out of Romans chapter 1, is, I think, a helpful concept.
Right. There's no one that's approaching you that is in a neutral point. They should also be offering up a alternative explanation to your explanation. It's enough to answer critiques and attacks, but this guide will help you kind of turn it and say, okay, well, what are you bringing to the table? Because there's obviously some way that the other person that you're talking to is viewing the world. How do they view evidence? What constitutes as evidence for their side? And so this way you kind of, instead of needing to understand quantum physics to figure out whether or not quantum physics is a direct argument for God, you can take a step back and say, okay, well, what about quantum physics allows you to generate that idea and believe that science gives you truthful data, or that it lends to the credibility of whatever they're arguing for. So this helps does that.
It's kind of, the question kind of like, okay, fine, what has to be the case for science, even in general, to work, right? And this is kind of a transcendental question, a presuppositional question, right? So we don't let the unbeliever get away with these assumptions. Oftentimes in evidentialist approaches, the unbeliever just gets away with all kinds of assumptions because we're focusing on a particular evidence. And, we're saying, well, let's step back because there are all kinds of assumptions, and we want to know how they deal with those. Right. And so we don't allow them to get away with that stuff. Right?
Yeah. Presuppositionalists aren't opposed to evidence. We just need to understand where somebody is coming from to be able to claim that evidence as good or wrong or
right. And we attempt to try to help them to see where they're coming from.
Right.